Thanks, Yolanda. Good morning. Welcome. Good song. Good singing. Hey, glad that you are here this morning on the first Sunday of October. Can you believe it? It's fall, y'all. Whether it feels like it outside or not, it's the first Sunday of the last quarter of the year. And I bring that up because at the beginning of the year, we challenged ourselves to share 5,000 meals together as a church family. And then we quickly upped that to 15,000 meals together as a church family. I want you to know, going into the last quarter, we sit right now right at about 10,000 meals that we have shared together, which is awesome. Yeah. Now, if you do the math, we need to pick it up just a little bit, which really means you need to remember to drop those marbles in the jar out here, okay? Because if you're like me, I forget to do that sometimes. But it's not about dropping marbles, it's about getting in each other's lives. Good things happen around a table. Also want to remind you that it's October, and on the 25th of October is our fall festival coming up. It's going to be a really good, fun day of fellowship and fun for the kids and for the adults. There is information. There are some sign-up sheets on the tables out here. You can sign up on the app. If you don't have the app, shame on you. I've been wanting to say that, Jeremy. I just didn't have the nerve to say that, so thank you. You can sign up for that on the app. It's going to be a fun, fun day. There's also some handouts that you can invite your friends to be a part of that. That'll be good. So, okay, that's out of the way. Talking about being a sports fan. Jim Harbaugh, the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers right now, very famous, very successful head coach, has had a saying that he is associated with. And his kind of famous saying is, "Who has it better than us?" Somehow, years ago, my wife and I started saying that to each other. Who has it better than us? And I don't know that a day goes by that one of us doesn't say to the other, who has it better than us? And you would think that that would always come after a time when something really great happened, right? Like, boy, this is perfect. This is such a great thing that just happened. Who has it better than us? And that's true. But more times than not, we will say that to each other after something happened that's like, oh no, how did that happen? That's terrible. That's going to hurt. That's going to cost me money. How could I do that? Martha will look at me and say, who has it better than us? And my answer is always the same. Nobody. And I need that reminder. I need that reminder how much I've been blessed and all the opportunities that I have, because it's really easy to forget those things. And it's especially easy to forget those things when those things, those blessings, those comforts, those joys start to be threatened a little bit. I need to remind myself, who has it better than us? And I say that to give us a little bit of intro into our topic this morning. We're spending a few weeks looking at some of the incoming calls from God to different men and women in Scripture. And this morning we are going to take a look at an incoming call from God to a woman by the name of Esther. The story of Esther is a really important story. And it is a story. It is story-driven. There are heroes, there are villains, there are cliffhangers, plot twists, surprise endings. There is drama at every turn. I mean, it is a fascinating story. This morning, rather than read through the whole story, I'm going to kind of give you the cliff notes of the story of Esther. We'll do the Reader's Digest version, but then I want to circle back and talk about what's this story mean for us? What are some things that we can learn about God's incoming call, not just to people like Esther long ago, but to people like you and me today? So first, let me introduce the characters of the story. And when I say characters, I don't want you to think, long ago, far away, in some make-believe world. These are real people living this real story. And of course, first there's Esther. Esther is a young Jewish orphan. She is displaced. She is living in the Persian Empire. Her parents had died, so she's an orphan. But she was sort of adopted by a cousin by the name of Mordecai. Now, your translation might say uncle. The Hebrew is a little bit vague on that, but it's a close relative, probably a cousin, an older man who sort of adopted Esther. So Mordecai is there living with Esther as well. There's the king of Persia, a guy by the name of Xerxes. He's going to play a prominent role in this story. Every king has a queen. Xerxes had Queen Vashti. It looks very angry there, right? That's actually an after picture of Vashti, okay? That's how she's going to look later on in the story. But that's Queen Vashti. And then there's also a guy by the name of Haman. Haman is the wicked servant of Xerxes. And when I say servant, I don't want you to think slave, anything but. Haman was a very important man in the Persian Empire. In fact, we're going to see that Haman is actually put number 2 in the entire empire. So that is the group that is involved in this story. You know, you've heard it said that the devil's in the details. When it comes to the story of Esther, God is in the details. We need to pay very close attention to the details of this story, because that's where we're going to see the hand of God work. And that's where we're going to hear the call of God to Esther. So, after 70 years in captivity at the hands of the Babylonians, and then later on the Persians who overtake the Babylonians, the Jewish people are finally allowed to return back to their homeland, back to Jerusalem. And about 50,000 Jews return back to Jerusalem, but not all the Jews go home. Some stay in Persia. Some have become acclimated to life in that culture. Esther is one of those who stays in Persia, as does her cousin Mordecai. And the story begins with Xerxes, the king of Persia, throwing himself a 6-month party. It's good to be king. And during this 6-month party, basically what he is doing is celebrating himself. And he's celebrating all the things that he's accomplished as king of Persia. At the end of the 6-month party, he throws kind of a private party for his closest buddies. Think after party, okay? He's throwing an after party that lasts a week. At the same time, Queen Vashti is also throwing a party for the women in another court. Toward the end of the after party, Xerxes been doing some drinking during this party, and he decides he wants Vashti there. He wants Vashti, what he wants to do is really show everyone how beautiful the queen is. She's really nothing more than eye candy to the king. And he wants to parade her before his cronies and look how beautiful the queen is. So he sends for the queen. Vashti, who has a mind of her own, says, no. I'm not going to allow you to parade me before your men friends. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not coming. Xerxes is not only embarrassed, he's humiliated. And he asks his advisor, what am I going to do? Because the queen said she won't come. And the advisors give him advice. You better do something. You got to put your queen in her place. Because if you don't, women all over the empire are going to be standing up for their husbands. We can't have that. So Xerxes puts her away. He puts her away. He gets rid of his queen. But now he realizes, I got a problem. I don't have a queen. So he has to find a new queen. But he doesn't want just any queen. He wants the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. And so a search goes out. Esther's beauty catches the eye of some of the king's representatives, and she is placed in this kind of year-long beautification program. This group of women, or they're going to make them just as beautiful as they possibly can be. And at the end of this program, they come before the king, and who do you think Xerxes chooses? Ooh, I'll take her. Esther. Now, he doesn't know she's a Jew. He just knows she is beautiful. So Esther becomes the queen of Persia. And because Mordecai is such a close relative, he sort of gets pulled into this royal family as well. He's living in the royal courts of Xerxes. Time passes. One day Mordecai overhears a plot to assassinate King Xerxes. And he goes and he tells the guards. He tells people in charge, hey, there's people planning on assassinating the king. The guards stop it. They keep the king from being assassinated. But the fact that Mordecai sort of saved the day, that gets lost in the shuffle. Now, enter the man named Haman. Things get very interesting when Xerxes decides to make Haman second in command. King Xerxes wants to make sure that everyone's giving the second in command the kind of respect that the second in command deserves. So he passes a law saying everyone has to bow down to Haman. Haman loves that law. I mean, he loves that law. He loves people bowing down to him. And everybody does except one person, Mordecai. Mordecai bows to no man. Mordecai bows only to God. And it drives Haman crazy. It just drives Haman nuts that this disrespectful Jew will not bow down to me. And Haman doesn't want to just punish Mordecai. He wants to punish all of Mordecai's people. He doesn't want to just kill Mordecai. He wants to kill all of the Jews. And so he goes to the king. And he says, hey, Xerxes, we need to exterminate all of the Jews because they're not following your laws. Meaning, this one guy is not bowing down to me. We need to get rid of all the Jews. And Xerxes is like, okay. However, I've got a caveat. We're going to make one day when all the Jews will be killed. It's like a national purge through all the provinces. And so they cast lots, they throw dice, and a date is chosen 11 months in the future. And Xerxes issues a decree. 11 months in the future, all of the Jews will be purged from the land. They will all be put to death, and this decree goes out. Could you imagine? Could you imagine hearing that in 11 months, me, my family, everyone that I love is going to be put to death? There is national mourning among the Jews. There's weeping throughout the land, including in the royal city. Mordecai, a Jew, is weeping. He is mourning the news that he and his people are set for destruction. Now, check this out. Mordecai lays at the entrance to the king's gate. He's weeping. Esther's servants see Mordecai weeping, and they take the message back to Esther, and they say, hey, your cousin Mordecai, he is really upset about something. Esther is so insulated in the palace. She has no idea what's going on. She hasn't heard the news. She has no idea why Mordecai is so upset. So she sends a messenger back asking Mordecai, what's going on? Why are you so upset? Mordecai sends another message to her saying, here's why I'm so upset. In fact, he sends her a copy of the edict saying, the king, your king, is going to put all the Jews to death on this date. And he tells her, you got to do something. You got to do something about this, Esther. You're going to have to go before the king. And you're going to have to change his mind. Esther sends a message back to Mordecai. Do you know what you're asking me to do? Everybody knows if someone approaches the king and they haven't been summoned, it's a death sentence. They can be put to death. Do you remember what happened to Vashti? I can't go before the king unless I'm summoned. And oh, by the way, I haven't been summoned in over 30 days. Don't hold your breath, Mordecai. I'm not even sure I'm the flavor of the month anymore. I can't just go before the king. It doesn't work that way. Which brings us to undoubtedly the most famous verse in the entire book of Esther. Esther chapter 4, verse 12. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will rise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to a royal position for such a time as this. Mordecai's response gets Esther's attention. She reconsiders. Who knows but that you haven't been put in this place at this time to do this thing right now. And Esther changes her mind. Esther says, I'll do it. However, Mordecai, you got to do something for me first. Before I go before the king unsummoned, I want you and as many Jews as you can get together to pray and fast for 3 days. Remember last week, talking about Nehemiah, I made the point that we need to kneel into our calling before we step into our calling. That's exactly what Esther's doing. She is kneeling into her calling. She says, Mordecai, you and the Jews, you pray and you fast for 3 days before I go before the king. And that's exactly what they do. And then Esther goes before King Xerxes. She has no idea how he's going to respond. However, he welcomes her. He's glad to see her. In fact, he asks her, what do you want? Now, we already know that Esther is very beautiful, but boy, she is smart too. Because she tells the king, here's what I want. I want to throw a banquet. I want to throw a banquet, and I want it to be for you and Haman. And Xerxes is like, well, who doesn't like a banquet, right? So he said, yeah, good, great. And then Xerxes tells Haman, hey, you have been invited to a banquet, me and you, hosted by Queen Esther. Haman loves this. This is great. In fact, Haman is convinced, I'm going to be the guest of honor. I know, it's really kind of for me. Haman is on cloud 9. He's feeling great. The queen is hosting a banquet in my honor. And he's walking down the street feeling so good when he comes across Mordecai. And Mordecai doesn't bow down. And again, Haman just hates it. He can't stand the fact that Mordecai refuses to bow before him. So he goes home to his wife and he starts grumbling, he starts complaining. That guy Mordecai just drives me nuts. I can't stand the fact that he disrespects me that way. And his wife says, you are second in command in the empire of Persia. Don't let this guy bother you. Here's what you need to do. Build a gallows, a big one, 75 feet tall. Build it tonight. Hang Mordecai on it tomorrow. And Haman is like, that is a good idea. I'm going to sleep so much better tonight. Thank you. That same night, Xerxes goes to sleep, but he can't go to sleep. He's lying, he's tossing and turning. I don't know what you do when you can't sleep. I read. It always makes me sleepy. That's what Xerxes does. He gets out the copies of the reports of things that have happened in his reign. Kind of think minutes, of the meetings. Of course, he's the king, so he doesn't read it himself. He has someone reading to him. But they start reading him things that have taken place during his reign in Persia. And lo and behold, the thing that they read to him is the report of an assassination attempt against his life. He didn't know anything about it. Wait, you're telling me that someone tried to kill me? There was a plan to kill me? Yes, there was. And it was thwarted? Yes, it was. Well, who thwarted the plan? Who saved my life? Mordecai. Mordecai? Esther's cousin Mordecai? Yeah. Wow. So what did we do for Mordecai? Nothing. We didn't do anything for him. He saved my life. He saved the king. We kind of let it go. The next day when Haman runs into Xerxes, Xerxes asks him a question. Haman, what do you think a king like me should do for someone that he really wants to honor? What should I do for a person that I really want to show my gratitude towards? And of course, Haman's thinking, it's me. I know you're talking about me, but I'll play along. Yes, what should you do? Here's what I do, king. This is just me. I mean, if you really wanted to honor someone, I'd put a robe around his neck. I'd put a crown on his head. I'd put him on a royal mount, and I would parade him through the city. That's what I'd do. And Xerxes is like, what a great idea. That's exactly what we'll do. And he says, here's what we'll do. Haman, I want you to do those very things for Mordecai. Wait, what? Mordecai? I hate Mordecai. He's the worst. But of course, Haman has to do it. I mean, the king commanded it. He has to do it. So Haman does that. He puts the robe around his neck. He puts a crown on his head. He puts him on the royal steed. He parades him through the city. And don't you know that Haman is just devastated? He is so upset. He is just boiling inside the whole time. And yet, he still has to go to the banquet. He still has a banquet to attend. And so he attends the banquet. And Xerxes is in a great mood during the banquet. He's feeling great. And he asks Queen Esther, what do you want? What can I do for you? Up to half my kingdom. I'll give it to you, queen. And here's where Esther makes her move. She says, King, all I want is for you to spare the life of me and my people. That's all I want. And Xerxes is like, what are you talking about? What do you mean spare your life and the life of your people? Who wants to kill you? Who wants to kill your people? And Esther says, that guy. Haman. Haman wants to kill me and my people. And Xerxes realizes she's a Jew. And Haman has plotted to have the death of the queen and the queen's people. And now it's Xerxes that kind of loses it. Xerxes is incensed. So mad that he leaves the room. And when he leaves the room, Haman knows, I'm toast. This has gone from bad to much, much worse. My goose is cooked. And Haman goes and he begs Esther, do something, say something. In fact, he throws himself on Esther, literally. He throws himself on her just at the time when Xerxes walks back into the room. And he sees Haman on top of the queen. He assumes that Haman is trying to molest the queen, and that does it. And it's not very long before Haman is swinging from the 75-foot gallows that he had built for Mordecai. And Haman's entire estate, including being second in command, is transferred then to Mordecai. But the story's not over. Because Xerxes can't rescind the order to have the Jews exterminated. But he does amend it. He says, here's what I'll do. On that day, on the day of the great purge, the Jews are going to be allowed to arm themselves. And they're going to be allowed to defend themselves. And that's exactly what happens. In fact, when that day comes, not only do the Jews thrive, they kind of get the upper hand. And the story ends with Xerxes as king, Esther being queen until she dies, Mordecai being second in command, and the Persian Empire, as well as the Jews, all thrive under their leadership. It is a significant story in Hebrew history. That's why we have the book of Esther. It's such an important story. And it's an important story for us as well. So, all these years removed, the question for us is, so what can we take away from that? What's the message for us? It's a great story. But what can we learn from the story of Esther? Let me share with you 3 quick takeaways. Here's the first. Oh, I skipped one. Here's the first. God may not always be recognized or mentioned, yet He is always there. Kind of a famous trivia question about the Bible. What's the only Bible book that doesn't mention the name of God? It's Esther. Esther is the only book in the Bible that the author is not mentioned. God's name is never mentioned in the book of Esther. Yet that doesn't mean that God is not there. He's there when an orphan is adopted by her cousin. He's there when that orphan girl is discovered by royalty. He's there when she is chosen by the king to be the next queen. He's there when she's put into a position at just the right time to save her people. He's there when Xerxes is up late at night and can't sleep. He's there when they open up the books to just the right page. He's there way back when the scribes were writing down the assassination attempt. Well, let's hear it for the note takers, right? Let's hear it for all you note takers. God is there in so many details of this story, dozens more. This book of Esther reminds us that God does not move apart from people and circumstances. He moves through people, and He moves through circumstances. And one question that I would ask you to consider, where can you look back and see God at work in your life when you didn't even know He was at work in your life? You know, back in your rearview mirror. You didn't realize at the time, you didn't see Him at the time, but you look back in your rearview mirror and you say, wow, you know, that came together in just the right way. That person showed up at just the right time. What are the chances that she would say just the right thing? God is in the details. God is at work even when we don't recognize it, even when we don't see Him. Here's the second thing we learn from this. We don't get to choose our time. Here's what you need to remember. Again, God works through us, not just for us. Mordecai says to Esther, who knows? Who knows but that you have come to this royal position for such a time as this? And I think Esther would have argued, but this isn't such a great time. I can't go before the king. I haven't been before the king in weeks. I'm afraid that he's not going to accept me and welcome me if I go before the king. Maybe we need to reschedule this thing, Mordecai. But Mordecai is bold enough, and he's wise enough to challenge Esther to think beyond herself. You got to think beyond yourself, Esther. You received a calling from God. Speaking of a calling from God, I think there's something here that we learn in the contrast of Esther. And we learn it, I think, through our own experience. When God puts something on our heart, there's a default setting that we seem to drift towards. When you discern a call from God, there's this default setting that we seem to always drift towards, and it's the path of least resistance. Okay, God, I feel like you're trying to tell me something. I feel like you want me to do something. I'm being challenged. How can I do it in the most comfortable way possible? How can I do it in the safest way possible? What is the path of least resistance for me to answer this incoming call? Esther could have so easily defaulted to the path of least resistance. She could have just stayed in the palace, living the good life, completely insulated from everything else that's going on out there in the rest of the world. She could have played it safe. But she doesn't. Mordecai was challenging her to ask herself not just what's in it for me, but what might God want to do with me and through me. None of us get to choose our own time. We don't get to schedule the incoming call from God. You know, I got more time at the end of the month, God. Let me postpone this call. We don't get to do that. I know that some of you have experienced some terrible things in your life. You've gone through some really difficult things that you never would have chosen for yourself. We don't get to choose those circumstances. What we do get to choose is how are we going to respond to those circumstances. And I also know others of us have received such tremendous blessings, such tremendous opportunities. You know, the people who are born on third base and they're convinced they hit a triple. We didn't do it. We didn't get here by ourselves. We were just blessed this much. We didn't get to choose all these blessings. We just got them, all these opportunities. What we do get to choose is what we do with the blessings and how we use the opportunities that God has given us. I love what's said about King David in the book of Acts, chapter 13, when Paul says this about David. Now, when David had served God's purposes in his generation, he fell asleep. That is a great statement. I would love for that to be said about me one day, wouldn't you? When he served God's purposes in his generation, when she served God's purposes in her generation. You know, so often we lose sight of God's purpose in the middle of either the heartaches and or the opportunities. And so we kind of drift into this default mode. The default setting is always going to avoid risk. It's always going to avoid sacrifice. It's always going to avoid self-denial. But listen, if you receive a call from God, an incoming call from God will always involve some level of risk. And it will always involve some level of sacrifice. And it will always involve some level of self-denial. That's always true of God's call. Now, Satan is calling your heart as well. His call is going to lead you to selfishness, self-preservation, self-centeredness. So when you're trying to discern a call from God, and it's a call and you say, you know, there's no risk here, there's no sacrifice, there's no self-denial, it's probably from the wrong king. It's probably not a call from God. And then finally, I think we learn from this story that we need others to help us stay focused on God's incoming call. Esther is not the only hero in this story. Mordecai also is a hero in this story. This man who took it upon himself to raise this orphan girl when her parents died. And then he models allegiance to God when he refuses to kneel before Haman. And even after she becomes queen, he's still shepherding her heart. He is still speaking truth to her. Even when she's in danger of drifting into that default position. Esther needed Mordecai in her life. Just like every one of us needs someone else in our life. We need a Mordecai in our life as well. Someone who challenges us. Someone who's not afraid to speak truth into our lives when they see us maybe starting to drift into that default setting. We all need a few Mordecais in our life. So, I'll challenge you to ask yourself, who are the Mordecais in my life? Who are the friends? Who's the family? Who are the men? Who are the women who loved me enough to speak truth when they see me start to drift? Who love me enough to challenge me to answer an incoming call from God? The story of Esther, it was just as much about a spiritual mentor named Mordecai who adopts this orphan girl, who later speaks to her once she becomes queen and challenges her to focus on a different king other than Xerxes. We all need Mordecais in our life. And we all have the opportunity to be a Mordecai to someone else. Esther made a move. She made her move. She was challenged. She made a decision. She made a move. Maybe this morning you need to make a move. Maybe for some of you that move is prayer and fasting. I need to get serious about my relationship with God. I need to pray and fast about my relationship with God and how God is using me and how I'm answering His call. Maybe for some of you it's repentance. You need to make a move. You need to take a risk. Maybe some sacrifice, maybe some self-denial, and admit there's some sins that I need to repent of. For some of you, it might be baptism. You need to make a move. God has put you at this place, at this time. Who knows that He hasn't lined everything up just now for this reason, and He's speaking to your heart right now. Who knows, but you're not right here, right now, for such a time as this. This is your moment. Because, come on, who's got it better than us? If we can help you this morning anyway, come to the front, let us know. Let's go ahead and stand, and we'll sing.